Thank you everyone for participating. For myself, on a more personal note, for the blue economy or for maritime, I always just thought that, oh, it just involved fishing and maybe just shipping and the ports. But for more recent times, I found out that it involves more than what I already knew. I mean, we had a vast economy. Oh, hi, Favor. You're joining from VI. Welcome. Oh, we got to know through our speaker. It's a pleasure to meet you. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining us. So, as I was saying, please don't forget to just tell us where you're joining us from, whether you're in Lagos, whether you're outside Lagos, how you got to know about the webinar. We'll be watching the chat box. So our waters are a much bigger asset than we realize. And then that's what this webinar is going to delve into. Basically, we're going to be talking deeply what exactly is available to us as Nigerians, what exactly is available to you as a lawyer, what exactly is available to you as an investor, what exactly is available to you. If you're a lawyer, you'll be able to tell your client, okay, this is where you should invest in, this will work for you. This is something in the next few years you will see a lot of income. Okay, I'm still expecting a few more people. Our speaker will be joining us soon. We'll be hitting the road. Okay, so okay, I think we have a message in the chat box. Oh, hello. You were joining from the University of Port Harcourt. It's a pleasure to meet you, Prince. Wow. You got to know about the webinar from a LinkedIn post. Wow. That's amazing. That's amazing. So we have a lot of people here because of the speaker. That's amazing. I'm sure you're looking forward to having the speaker speak on this topic that she is learning. I mean, I too am excited. So I'm going to be introducing the speaker shortly. Um, she's a personal friend. I mean, I've known her for a couple of years now. Um, we are privileged to have with us today Miriam Damhabu. She's a professional in the maritime marine resources sector. So I'm going to be reading her bio. I know if you're excited to have her here with us and talk about what she knows best, please just give us like comments, emojis in the chat box. We're excited to hear from you. Hello, Sas. It's a pleasure to meet you. You're a bar aspirant, a student in Nigerian Law School. Wow, that's amazing. Attachment in Abuja. Oh, great. It's a pleasure to have you with us today. Thank you for joining us. So I'm going to quickly run through the speaker's bio and then I'm going to hand over the floor to her. I mean, we're excited, and we're looking forward to this webinar today. So Mariam Dahabu is a dedicated and passionate lawyer skilled in commercial and maritime law. She obtained her bachelor's degree in law from University of Leeds, United Kingdom, a master's degree in maritime law from University of Southampton, United Kingdom as well, and has been called to the prestigious Nigerian bar. Currently, Mariam is a counsel in the Admiralty Shipping and Energy Department of the law firm Foundation Chambers at the heart of Victoria Island, Lagos. She's also the Assistant Secretary of the Maritime Committee of the Nigerian Bar Association section on business law. Mariam hosts the legal podcast named FC Podcast, FC Pods, a platform where legal professionals discuss matters regarding international transportation, corporate and commercial law, energy, oil, gas, and trade matters. Through her extensive education, practical experience, and commitment to professional growth, Miriam is dedicated to delivering exceptional legal services and remains a valuable asset to the field. I don't know if you're excited, but I am. I'm always excited to hear her talk on what she knows best. So please join me and welcome Miriam Dahabu as she takes us through today's presentation. Welcome, Miriam. Good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone, and a very warm afternoon, Mercy. I'm very delighted. I'm very delighted to be here. I'm very grateful and honored for the opportunity to share on a topic that I really, really like talking about. So,
We're happy to have you.
yeah, I'm sure that we're in for a great time. And thank you, everybody, for joining. Thank you to Wall and Ace Law Firm for inviting me, and big thank you to my law firm as well, for edging me and supporting me, cheering me on, Foundation Chambers. So yeah, I'm ready to go if you give me the green light to go.
Thank you. Thank you very much for doing this. I mean, go ahead. Floor is
Okay,
yours.
all right. Good afternoon, everybody, and a very warm welcome once again to today's webinar. Today we'll be talking about understanding Nigeria's blue economy, some challenges and limitations. But then today's webinar will be a bit more comprehensive, right? I would presume that not everybody knows as much about the blue economy as, as people say, and so we would build up conversations today, right? So at the end of this webinar, if they ask you any question about blue economy, you should be able to lecture them, give them a 10 over 10 answer. You should be able to interact with anyone in the space, just from the knowledge today, right? So I hope it's that interactive. So please, totally write in the comments if something resonates with you. If you have a question, please write in the comment section and then we'll come to it at the end of the webinar. In the meantime, let me start by sharing my screen. All right, so in the comment section, you can just confirm that you can see my screen, but I believe you can see my screen. So before we begin, I want to do a quick game. Let's test your knowledge on the economy. Let's see where you are with the blue economy. So first of all, we're going to do this game where you have your 10 fingers up and I'm going to ask you 10 questions, right? If any of them resonates with you, you're going to put the finger down, okay? So the first one, put a finger down. Actually, no, let's do the other way around. So you do not have any fingers up, and then I would say put a finger up, so you put a finger up instead of put a finger down. Put a finger up if you have eaten fish this week. If you've eaten fish this week, put a finger up. I have. Put a finger up if you've visited the beach this year. If you visited the beach this year, put a finger up. I think I have. Okay, I'm seeing hands up. All right, put a finger up if you've been on a boat or a ferry. In Nigeria, outside Nigeria, you've taken a boat or a ferry to Ikorodu, from Ikorodu to VI at CMS. anywhere.
Not in those codes.
Okay, fantastic. Put a finger up if you've heard about the blue economy before today. If you've heard, like, it's not strange to you, you can really, there's something, you know, you should have been hearing it some way, somehow. Okay, fantastic. May I have what? 4 fingers up. Okay, put a finger up if you've ordered seafood at a restaurant before. I promise you it would lead somewhere. Tell me if you ordered seafood pasta, seafood okra. Okay, put a finger up if you've ever been stuck in Apapa traffic. I don't know if you've heard about Apapa traffic. So if you've ever been stuck in Apapa traffic, put a finger up. Okay. Now put a finger up if you've ever dreamed of going on a cruise. You've seen those big cruise boats. You say, God, when? God, how? God, please. Put a finger up. Okay. All right. Put a finger up if you know someone who works in oil and gas. You know someone who works in Chevron, Shell, NNPC, an oil and gas company. Put a finger up if you know someone who works in ports, who works in customs, who works in the Navy. Yeah, who works in Navy, ports, who works with water, that vibe. All right, okay. And the final one, put a finger up if you think Nigeria can make so much money from the oceans. Me, my 10 fingers are up, my 20 fingers are up, 30 fingers, everything is up. Okay, so this gives you a perspective to what the blue economy is about, right? So if you have ever eaten fish, you've ordered seafood, you've visited the beach, you've dreamed of going on a ship, on a cruise, you've been stuck in traffic with the port traffic, you know someone that works in oil and gas, someone that works in the Navy, and you've heard about the blue economy, then you have an idea of what the blue economy is, right? So the blue economy encompasses everything that we've said. So I want to know, just before I continue, how many people had 10 fingers up? Does anybody have 10 fingers up though? Or 9? Worst case 8. Yeah, maybe? Okay. All right. So let's begin. What is the blue economy? Okay, well, let's begin actually. So water is a universal symbol of life. I'll be grateful if everyone mutes their microphone so that we do not have subsequent interruptions. Okay, so all right. Water is a symbol of life, right? 71%, like Mercy had said, 71% of the Earth's surface is covered in water, right? And the oceans hold like 96.5% of Earth's water. So there is water everywhere. Like the Fela song, water no get enemy. Like you actually cannot hate water because we are all like living and breathing and like we're coexisting with water. If you think about it, water supplies food, we drink water, water purifies the air, water provides job opportunity, water helps with recreation, water assists with like coastal and marine ecosystems. Like there's just so much that one can do, one can learn from, one can benefit from water. And all of this comes together, the activities, the scope, the possibilities, the exploration of water, births the term the blue economy. Okay, so this webinar, this presentation, I'll be answering 10 questions about the blue economy. All right, 10 questions. So if you leave at question 5, if you leave at question 6, then your class is not over. You leave at question 2, you've not finished. We will mark you absent. All right, so let us begin. First of all, what is the blue economy about, right? I know I've given like a background to blue economy, but how will we define the blue economy? The blue economy can also be known as the ocean economy. Now, this is the sustainable use of ocean resources for economic growth, to improve livelihood, and for job creation. The sustainable use. If it is not sustainable, then it's not blue economy, all right? If it is not profitable, then it's not the blue economy. So we're thinking, how best can we use the ocean in a way that benefits the ocean, but also benefits man, right? Because the ocean was not made for man and man is not made for ocean. Like we have to coexist somehow, some way, right? But then a sustainable use of ocean resources for economic growth, improve livelihood, and job creation. It also refers to economic activities that are derived from ocean-based industry. And when I say oceans, I mean lakes, I mean seas, I mean ponds, I mean every water body, right? So, but I'm using the word ocean. I'm using the word ocean to subsume everything. All right. So it refers to from ocean-based industries as well as the assets goods, and services provided by the marine ecosystem. All right. So the goal is to conserve and sustainably use the oceans, the sea, and our resources for sustainable development. So you can see that sustainability is very key. Sustainability is at the core of blue economy, right? How can we sustain the oceans, but also sustain, do you feel me? So that is essentially what the blue economy is about, right? How can we use the ocean? How can we sustainably use the ocean for economic growth, to improve our livelihood, and to create jobs? All right. Now, what are the sectors in the blue economy? So I can imagine that many people would think that the blue economy is just about shipping, and that is where it stops. That is not where it stops. Right? Maybe we think, okay, it's just about fishing, but that's not where it stops. There's so many sectors. In fact, to be honest, this webinar is not entirely encompassing, but done my best to be as comprehensive as possible with several examples. So what are the sectors in the blue economy? That is my second question. All right. First of all, there is shipping and maritime transportation. Now, it will interest you to know that like shipping is one industry that stands the test of time, no matter what. Come rain, come shine, come war, come COVID, come anything, it will stand the test of time. Why? During wars, they are shipping weapons. During COVID or during, lockdowns, they are shipping medications, for instance, right? So, like, no matter what is going on, the shipping industry still goes on. It goes, round the clock. So, the global movement of people and passengers via ships and vessels is essentially global trade and supply chain. That is blue economy happening. All right. So, another sector is fisheries and aquaculture. So of course, like, the seafood you're eating surely comes from the sea, right? So, fish and every other aquaculture harvested from natural sources like the oceans, the rivers, the lakes, all of that is part of blue economy. So the fish pond in your grandma's house is blue economy, right? So, the fish seller that is by your junction, for instance, she is part of the blue economy, all right? Another sector is the ports and coastal infrastructure. So, of course, if ships are coming into a country, they need somewhere to berth, right? They need terminals to offload their containers, right? So the management of the ports, for instance, the building of the ports infrastructure, building of terminals, management of terminals, that is part of the blue economy. Now, marine renewable energy. So this encompasses, of course, energy that is gotten from ocean sources, right? So for instance, you can see in this picture now, how like there's a windmill, right? So from the energy gotten from the waves, from the breeze, from the water, this is part of blue economy, all right? So I hope we're seeing like, perspectives to the blue economy. Coastal and marine tourism. So if you've ever imagined being on a cruise in Turkey, on a cruise in Greece, on a cruise in Lagos waters, maybe, it's part of the blue economy. All right. If you've been on the beaches, if you've done any water sports, so from like maybe snorkeling to canoeing to any water sports, really, it's part of the blue economy. So the leisure, the enjoyment, the benefit to the local economy, that's part of the blue economy. Now, another aspect is seabed mining. What is seabed mining about? It's about mining minerals from the ocean floor. So, on another hand, people can like go inside, dig deep into the earth, right, and mine minerals. But then there are also minerals at the seabed of the water, right? So, for instance, in Namibia, there are diamonds and phosphorus at their seabed. So that's another aspect of the blue economy. Another aspect is marine business services. I know that a handful of people here would be lawyers, but I've seen a couple people that are not lawyers, but they're just interested in the sector. So another aspect really for people to benefit, or like, just part of the blue economy really, are marine insurers. So all these ships, all those vessels, terminal operators, insurers, right? Maritime lawyer. I am a maritime lawyer, so I'm very much part of the blue economy. They're shipping agents, they're maritime surveyors, right? They're mining agencies, they're people who work on deck. So they're dock workers. So, they're all part of the ecosystem that makes the blue economy what it is. There is also the marine research and development as well. So, of course, these are people who they explore the oceans, the ecosystem, biodiversity, right? They research. Later on, we'll see that pharmaceuticals could get like certain organisms from the ocean to make medications, that would eventually be useful to humans. Another aspect is shipbuilding and ship repairs. So this is like heavy construction, for instance, the maintenance of ships, the repair of ships, right? In fact, there's also even ship scrapping. So, there are times when a ship is super old, the ship has broken down, irreparable. It would cost more money to maybe repair it than buy another one. And so they break down the steel. It's because, the ship is made of steel, right? So they break it down and then they sell the different parts. Another one is offshore oil and gas extraction. So I know that's, the very popular one. I work in oil and gas, for instance, right? So, how people say they work in oil and gas. So they're going deep in the waters and extracting oil or crude for production, for energy production. So there are several aspects, even, beyond the ones we've mentioned, but these are critical or crucial parts of the blue economy. Now, the third question is, what is the value of the blue economy? Okay, I'm talking about blue economy. All right. So, I mean, how much are we looking at here? Right? Like, what is the money, how much can we make? How much can we make from this sector, for instance? All right. So let's see what that's saying. Yeah, my bad. Okay. All right. So first of all, Nigeria is a coastal country. So you can see the diagram that the map of Nigeria here. At the bottom of the map, where there's Lagos, there's Port Harcourt, there's Calabar, there's Warri, we see that it's connected to the Atlantic Ocean. So first of all, we have like access to sea. All right. And you can see the other map, all the blue lines there, all like the blue markings. The blue markings there, they are like the lakes, the rivers, the waters that we have in the country. So I mean, our coastal line is looking like 853 kilometers. And, there are a number of states that this cuts across. So Lagos, Ondo, Bayelsa, Delta, Akwa Ibom, they have access to the Atlantic Ocean. And that's a big deal because there are many other countries who are landlocked. They have no access, no direct access to the ocean. All right. So this means that, first of all, we have so much access to the ocean. But then let's talk money. Okay. What are we looking at? So at the bottom, you would see that I referenced the people who did this research, or people who made these statements, right? They're directors of significant agencies in the maritime economy. See, the Nigerian blue economy can generate 7 trillion naira annually. I say 7 trillion naira annually. All right. Now imagine what our economy will do with 7 trillion. That is such a big deal. It can create over 350 million jobs. So think about the number of people that are unemployed. The blue economy itself is able to sufficiently create 350 million jobs. Now, Nigeria's blue economy overall or altogether is potentially valued at $296 billion. Now, I did not make this up. I did not make this up. The director of School of Maritime Transport Studies of the Maritime Academy of Nigeria said this last year. All right. And to give more context, this 269 billion is bigger than our budget for 2025. Right. So this gives context to the fact that, see, the Nigerian blue economy, like there's so much untapped resources here. There's so much that, we could be making in this economy with the blue economy. All right. So let's continue. The global significance. So now we'll talk about the significance of the blue economy in Nigeria. Now, what is the global significance of the blue economy? The marine blue economy contributes an estimated 5% of the global GDP. It contributes to the livelihood of over 50 million people, primarily in developing countries. Now, it would interest you to know that seafood is the primary source of protein for over 50% of people in developing countries. Over 50%. So seafood business is big business, right? And it's a big deal. And now, a very interesting quote is if the global blue economy were a country, it would be the 7th largest country in the world. And the ocean as an economic entity will be part of the G7. Now think of the most powerful countries that are in the G7. Think of, the Americas, right? Like how much power they wield. The blue economy, if it were a country, if the ocean were a country, it would be part of that WhatsApp group. They'll be sitting on the same table. So this is how much value the blue economy carries. All right. So we're going to go on. And subsequently we're going to talk about, okay, next, what are the laws that are relevant? Again, this list is inconclusive because there's so much to talk about, but then to give a solid background to everybody, right? So, we'll start off with the Nigerian Constitution, all right? We'll go to the Merchant Shipping Act. There's a Coastal and Cabotage Act that regulates shipping within the country, all right, within our coast, inside the country. There's a Nigerian Port Authority Act that regulates ports and ports management and everything that relates to that. There's a Nigerian Maritime Administration and Safety Agency, the NIMASA, and it's established by the NIMASA Act, of course. They're in charge of security, they're in charge of administration and safety in the maritime sector. There's the Shippers Council Act. The Shippers Council Act, there's a Fisheries Act as well. I bet you didn't know there was a Fishery Act. There is. There's a National Inland Waterways Authority Act, NIWA. See that I referred to NIWA subsequently. So there is a NIWA Act, there is Marine Insurance Act, and so it goes on and on and on and on, right? So this is to say that there are several regulations. Interacting with the Nigerian blue economy. Now, what are some international conventions, right, impacting the blue economy? Because as you would see, the ocean, like the high seas, everybody see, right? Our Atlantic Ocean in another country, for instance, Cameroon Cameroon, they're also linked to the Atlantic Ocean, right? So they're like the water is international, so there has to be international conventions, international laws guiding everybody. Now, I just highlight a few so that we don't spend the whole day here. So we start from 1974, the implementation of the International Convention for the Safety of Life at Sea. Now, the goal of this convention is to ensure maritime safety and to prevent maritime accidents, right? So regulating that. We go to the adoption of the United Nations Convention on the Laws of Sea, UNCLOS, right, as we call it. Now, this is an important, UNCLOS is very key because it's a very important legal framework for marine and maritime activities because it particularly defines the rights and responsibilities of different nations that are signatories to it, of their use of ocean resources, so that we don't deplete it, so that we don't interfere with, another nation's borders, for instance, or their own resources. So there is UNCLOS. And then there is UNICITRAL, United Nations Commission on International Trade Law. All right. So this goes beyond just the use of the oceans, but then international trade through the oceans, right? It plays a key role in developing the international legal frameworks in the pursuit of further mandates of progressive harmonization and modernization of international trade law, right? So that because every country has their own peculiarities, but then UNICITRAL is important because it sets the standard for everybody, right? In terms of international trade law and harmonization of trade laws. Then we go to 1995, the enactment of the International Convention on Standards of Training, Certification, and Watchkeeping for Seafarers, right? So this is regarding seafarers. Like I told you, they're part of the ecosystem and their regulations that guide that. 2024, we move to the establishment of the International Ships and Port Facility Security, ISPS code, right? So this is a code, this is a standard of security for every port facility, right, to ensure that they are protected from security threats and, the actions to take in the events that there is one. So the harmonization of those are some of the key international conventions. Of course, there are subsequent conventions on international trade, like Hamburg, Hague-Visby, Hague Rules, and so forth, right? Now, what's the importance of legal framework in the blue economy? That's our 6th question. So we're moving at a fantastic pace, I dare say. What is the importance of legal framework in the blue economy. I would think that for lawyers, this is very relevant to us, really, because, and for non-lawyers as well, because there's so many regulations. Depends on what problem you bring to my table. The problem you bring to my table would depend on the law I would, bring in response to it. So let's go through this. First of all, regulatory compliance. So, laws in blue economy or regulations in blue economy, they're important to provide necessary regulations and guidelines that govern maritime activities, ensuring that all the stakeholders adhere to established standards for safety, environmental protection, and economic viability, right? Remember, again, the definition of blue economy is the sustainable use of the ocean. If there's no regulation guiding the sustainable use, everybody's just going to use it as the desire, as the sole desire, right? So, for instance, if you think of our Petroleum Industry Act, PIA, it governs the exploration of oil and gas, right? If you think of our Nigerian Fisheries Act, it governs licenses, fishing zones, and things like that. So it's important for regulatory compliance. Two, ecosystem protection. Again, I'll keep going to the fact that it's sustainability. Blue economy is hinged on sustainability. Now, by enforcing laws and standards, legal framework help protect the marine ecosystem from overexploration and pollution. So they give room for, biodiversity and the health of oceanic habitats. For instance, the MAPO, International Convention for the Prevention of Pollution from Ships, right? It puts standards to where and how pollution would be discharged, garbage would be discharged on the sea, sewage, oil waste, all pollution, and things like that. Nigeria also has its own laws, environmental regulations laws, that also just guide the discharge of oil and pollution to guide the ecosystem so that it remains sustainable. Now, dispute resolution. So surely, like, if we're fighting, what is the regulation that will settle our fights? So that is part of why, and because the blue economy is so universal, it's so, like, several countries can be involved. Imagine shipping something from China, it stops at Cameroon, it comes to Nigeria, or it passes through Malaysia, right? So it involves several countries. And so when there is dispute, it's important that there are legal frameworks to facilitate the resolution of those disputes, right? So legal framework, it gives a structured approach to conflict resolution, which is important for harmony. Throwback to the Nigerian-Cameroon Bakassi Peninsula dispute many years ago, which was settled by the International Court of Justice. And it shows that, see, even with maritime boundaries, disputes are bound to happen, right? So this is with boundaries, how much more with trade, right? So 9 to 5, I mean, we're in court some days where somebody says, oh, an interesting case, somebody says, I imported onions from Indonesia, right? My onions came to Lagos and they're all bad. Is it the shipper's fault because water got into the container? And the shipper said, if we are representing the shipper, because I remember that case, we said, well, we are not at fault because, first of all, we did not know the states in which your onions were shipped. Were they in good condition? Were they in bad condition? We don't know if they sold rubbish to you. All right. And number two, there's a particular way you ought to pack this. Actually, maybe it wasn't onions. I think it was turmeric. I think it was turmeric. Yeah. But, we said there's a particular way you're meant to pack this. This is not how they packed it. So, and then, of course, there are now, regulations to buttress several things we're saying, if we're looking into the intricacies. But then I said that to say that disputes would arise. All right. So disputes in international trade, disputes in borders, disputes in boundaries. So international regulations are important to solve those. Next is maritime safety and security. I'm sure that, years ago, you must have been hearing back to back, hey, Nigerian waters and piracy. Hey, pirates are coming. Pirates of the sea. Pirates on the island. It's part of the blue economy. It's part of why it's important to have regulations, right? I mean, thankfully, NIMASA has done a fantastic job so far, significantly reducing the rate of piracy, alongside our Navy, alongside MP and the relevant organizations. But then legal frameworks are important to enhance safety on sea, to combat piracy, to regulate shipping standards, and ensure port security. So, for instance, we have the Suppression of Piracy and Other Maritime Offences Act 2019, right? So this act criminalizes piracy, right? So outrightly, piracy is a crime, there are punishments for this, there are fines for this, and it gives a legal basis for prosecution. You know that you cannot punish somebody if there's no law that criminalizes their action. All right. So laws like this ensure maritime safety as well. Another important reason why legal frameworks in the blue economy is important is that it facilitates investment and economic certainty. So with clear legal frameworks, for instance, the goal is to attract investment by providing predictability, all right, by protecting property rights and defining clear dispute measures. So for instance, the Cabotage Act, which is Nigeria's Coastal and Inland Shipping Act, right? The goal is to protect local shipping. The goal is to ensure that it's Nigerians that own shipping companies, it's Nigerians that own shipping vessels, it's Nigerians that are doing ship repairs, it's Nigerians that are operating in Nigeria waters, right? So if you're in Nigeria and you're in the business, you would feel protected because there's a law or there are laws that limit foreign vessels in our domestic water. There's also the AfCFTA, the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, which should, the goal is to ensure that there are protocols to facilitate trade in the African continent. All right, and finally, legal frameworks are important to ensure compliance with international obligations, right? They help countries comply with global treaties, global obligations concerning trade, concerning the oceans, concerning the environment, and things like that. Like I said, UNCLOS, for instance, right? It determines the boundaries of each country. It determines where the exclusive economic zone is. It determines where the high seas start from. It determines where your own where continental waters start from, things like that. So that, I mean, you cannot really draw a line in the ocean, but then you can measure it, right? So laws like that help us comply with international obligations, so that one country is not suffering at the expense of another, or another is not over enjoying at the expense of another. Now, let's go into the opportunities in the blue economy. I hope we're following. So let me take a pause here. If you're following, tell me you're following. Okay, if you're following, tell me you're following. Let me know that we're all on the same page. Yeah, that we're all on the same page before I continue. So, yeah, tell me okay. All right, you're following. Fantastic. Okay, all right, great. Okay, we can continue now. Okay. So back to what I was saying. Now what was I saying? See, opportunities in the blue economy. Okay, so what are the opportunities in the blue economy, right? How can a person benefit? How can a person how can a person benefit? What are the gains, or in fact not even benefits really? What are the prospects, right? Like, where can we make money from? Where can we make money? All right, we'll start here. 1 second. Oh dear. Okay. Now, one can position themselves as a key player in the fishing industry. Like I told you, see, there's a lot of potential for expansion, a lot of potential for growth, a lot of potential for positive a lot of potential in the fishing industry. In fact, a while ago, I was speaking with some of the executives in the maritime. I was speaking with some of the executives in the maritime committee of the Nigerian Bar Association, and one of them was saying how he was in Netherlands a few weeks back, and he bought fish, like salmon fish, for instance, and on it was literally written Nigerian salmon for like 50 something euros, and he was like, "What?" So clearly, we're exporting, right? Either we're exporting or they're Chinese trawlers, that are illegally fishing. We're going to come to that. But then Nigeria has significant potential for our waters in terms of like fishing, right? So we can easily become a core fishing nation, exporting our fishes, and just selling them as well. I understand that there used to be core fishing terminals in Nigeria, the Baka fishing terminal and Ebuhu fishing terminals, right? Where they were key locations to like optimize, to fish, to bring them, to package, and for many other things there. But then the fishing industry is a core opportunity for anyone considering exploring the blue economy in Nigeria. Maritime tourism or marine tourism, right? So, and as you know, I think this is the most straightforward one, really. We're very familiar with, the beaches in Lagos. We don't have as much again. They seem to be closing them down every 2 seconds. But then I'm sure that we're familiar with like the Oniru Beach Resort, for instance, Landmark Beach when it was still Landmark Beach, like Lacampine Tropicana, right? Lashe Bay, Takwa Bay, right? They're all part of the blue economy in terms of like maritime or marine tourism, right? To bring people into the country to have a good time. Leisure is part of it. Okay. Alternative sources of energy. So, I mean, surely we're all exhausted from the blackouts. We're exhausted from the grid failure that happens that happens bi-monthly, perhaps, or maybe even more frequently, right? We're exhausted from the removal of fuel subsidy and the high cost of fuel. We're exhausted from like fuel scarcity. The blue economy says, listen, you can literally generate energy from the water. Okay, we're talking about generating power and electricity from like solar, from wind, from the waves, from tidal waves, and things like that. So that's a core opportunity as well in the blue economy. Another is maritime transportation and port services. So, we currently have the Lagos Deep Sea Port, for instance. They're working on the Ibom Deep Sea Port, so a number of deep sea ports and just generally ports as well, right? Port construction, any work related to that, that's a solid blue economy opportunity. There's also coastal shipping. So cabotage shipping is basically like inland waterways, right? So moving goods from maybe Apapa to Ondo State, right? And as opposed to even using the road, using inland waters. So people as well. I know some friends who live in Ikorodu and they come to work in VI. A number of them use boats, use like the boats, for instance. So they join the ferry, go to work, and come back with that. So that's also like a solid opportunity as well. Marine biodiversity. So you to know that a number of like pharmaceuticals, a number of like cosmetics, there's a lot of research that is undertaking from like the coral reefs and just like our maritime organisms and things like that. So I know that we're also exhausted from the cost of foreign medication as well. You go to a pharmacy and they say, oh, there's Nigerian Panadol and there's American Panadol. And American Panadol is like maybe like 5 times the cost. Okay. But then we also, because we have access to rich waters, we're in a capacity to carry out research, right? Research on like our marine biodiversity and come up with our own medications or pharmaceuticals or just information, or chemicals really to assist with our production in pharmaceuticals. Education and human capacity development. So, another opportunity in the maritime, in the blue economy really is being part of like the marine academies, for instance, right? So for people that are interested, I know people that have done like seafarer trainings, people that are part of like the academic institutions, the maritime training academic institutions, for instance, there's skill acquisitions in coastal communities. So there are like a range of opportunities in the blue economy. But then with opportunities, with prospects, there are challenges. All right. So what are some challenges in the Nigerian ecosystem, especially in the Nigerian ecosystem, right? So what are some challenges that we face? First of all, there's a handful of regulatory overlap, right? And when I say regulatory overlap, we have the same organization trying to do this. We have several organizations trying to do the same thing. So regulatory overlaps create confusion and inefficiencies in the management of marine resources. So let me give an example: wreck removal. Okay, now wreck removal is the removal of wreck. If a ship spoils somewhere on the seas, if there are particles, things like that, that could literally harm any vessel or that could infringe on the safety, it's important that an agency removes the wreck. But now the conflict stems from the scope of the different agencies. NIWA, for instance, NIWA is National Inland Waterways Agency. From a section in their own act, section 9D, it gives them the authority to survey, to remove, and to receive wrecks that obstruct inland waterways. All right. Now that is NIWA. NIMASA, on the other hand, section 22, subsection 1 of the NIMASA Act, it says that the functions of the authority shall be to remove and receive wrecks. Are we saying is the same work? NPA as well. Now, NPA Act does it, the Nigerian Ports Authority Act. There is no express obligation to remove wreck, but then there's an obligation in Section 7 of the Act to control pollution arising from oil and any other substance from the ship using the port limit or their approaches. So essentially, if the wreck is causing pollution, they have the right to remove it. So we can see that, like, just the overlap of regulation and different agencies trying to do the same thing is problematic, right? So that's a significant problem. Another one is the office of the receiver and the assistant receiver of the wreck. So after you received it, now whose office? Okay, Section 362 of the Merchant Shipping Act. It says that there will be an office of the receiver and the assistant receiver of wrecks to be appointed by the minister, all right, with the power to handle wrecks. Now, if we continue, Section 2, subsection 1 of the Merchant Shipping Act says that the agency of government established to be responsible for marine safety administration and security shall be responsible for implementing the act. So essentially, it's saying that, see, the Merchant Shipping Act is in the hands of NIMASA, all right? NIMASA is responsible for administering this act, for implementing this act. So NIMASA says, okay, of course, we are the receiver, we should have the office of the receiver. But another problem, Nigerian Port Authorities, right? Nigerian Port Authorities, they have the power. They also have the power to enact regulations that relate to the port. So they also would say, see, this is the port problem. It's not your problem. We're the ones solving it. So I said all of those to say that in several situations, yeah, they're like, there's overlap of regulation. And so it's a question of who handles what when there's a problem. And this is such a quagmire. All right. Another one is inadequate infrastructure. I mean, I think that we're familiar with, conversations on how old our ports are. And generally, really, ports are very old. Because maritime and shipping is such an old business, right? But then what happens is it evolves. Okay, there's new technology that's meant to be brought in, there's smarter ships, things like that. There are facilities that should be brought in. But then our ports, not all our ports are on that same frequency, right? So certain shortcomings can lead to increased operational costs and delays in transportation and logistics. So for instance, the duration it would take to offload a container in Lagos is very different from the duration it would take to offload in a smart port, where they work like round the clock, where there's technology to offload in a couple of hours, in a few days, they're off. But then that's different. So when we do not have the adequate facility or infrastructure, it slows down the pace of international trade. Another important challenge we're facing in Nigeria, and I believe a number of developing countries, is illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. Now, like I said before, the statistics to show that there's been several Chinese, and I say this with emphasis, Chinese trawlers in Nigerian waters that fish in like crazy frequency with illegal procedures or tactics, unregulated, unreported, and illegal. All right. So it goes to say that, like, the stock that we have, we're not even sure what we have now, right? What we have left. This destroys like the ecosystem generally. It mixes up the ecosystem, and it's not only their fault, but there's also weak enforcement of fish regulation. So for instance, the Fisheries Act is even outdated. So there are a number of things, there are a number of like situations that it needs to be sorted out in terms of our fishing so that we can be positioned to benefit from the industry. And the first one is financial hurdle. I mean, money. We need money to move business, right? So the limited access to finance, investment, technology, these constrain the development of the blue economy. So for instance, like, you can't purchase a ship or a vessel without money, right? You can't start renewable energy on the sea without money. You can't do research without money. Okay, so even small scale fisheries and coastal communities, it's important that they're also educated and they're also financed to continue sustainable fishing methods. An interesting tweak to this is the Cabotage Vessel Finance Fund. Now, I previously talked about the Cabotage Act, one that I said it ensures, or the goal of the Cabotage Act is to ensure that it's Nigerian citizens that own vessels, that man vessels, that are, building the vessels and that are operating the vessels within Nigerian waters. But then to facilitate this, there is something the Act provides for. It's a Cabotage Vessel Finance Fund. All right. Let's believe that this fund was created maybe like some 20 years ago. Until today, we haven't disbursed yet. This year, they've been saying they're going to disburse. They've started the procedure. But we need to see somebody say, "I've collected money," So, it's while there are things like that, it's important that there's proper execution. There's no point saying that we're going to finance this if the money never gets released after 20 years. So we're going to number 9, and I'm wrapping up in a minute. What are some opportunities for reforms, right? Like, okay, what can we do differently? I'm sure that from, all the talk that we've been talking since, you can identify a couple places where we can do this differently. Maybe they can do this differently. All right. So the first would be to streamline regulation. So like I said, there's a lot of regulatory overlap. When there's clarity with regulation, we know who we are paying money to. We know where money is going to. We know which agencies we are going to get certificates from. We are going to call in terms of carrying recs from the sea and things like that. Another is enhancing collaboration. So I believe strongly that the government should be collaborating with private sector. Private sector should be collaborating with academics. We should be collaborating with researchers. We should collaborating with people that are doing PhDs. We should be like, it literally needs to be an ecosystem. Different agencies need to collaborate as opposed to trying to establish their own ground or duplicate what another agency is doing, right? It's important that there is partnership. It's important that like agencies are able to work together to achieve one sure goal in the blue economy. Another area for potential reform is the investment in sustainability. So of course, like we have extensively discussed about energy sources and the likes. It would be helpful to even create regulations and legislations around this sustainable use, right? And what's the word I'm looking for? And supporting investments, really, right? So the final one, of course, back to the conversation of money, financial partnerships and support. So it'd be helpful that government provides incentives, for instance, right? So that there's incentives for people in the industry, their tax incentives, their participation incentives, things like that, to ensure and encourage people to participate in the blue economy. And that is it. In conclusion, unlocking Nigeria's blue economy, there's vast opportunities for sustainable growth in Nigeria. We can leverage on our existing resources. And it's important to realize that to establish a robust legal framework, establishing a robust legal framework would promote interagency collaboration, and it would address certain challenges we're facing, from a legal point of view and from an economic point of view, right? Another challenge that I even skipped is exchange rates, for instance, right? It's interesting because exchange rates impact the duties that a person is paying, right? So as exchange rates is fluctuating, duties are fluctuating. The cost of importing a car, the cost of importing furniture, the cost of importing, anything else is increasing as well. So it's important that there is thankfully we have the Ministry of Marine and Blue Economy, but then it's important that like several other aspects are looked into, and there is collaboration and fusion with the different stakeholders and different agencies. Having said that, my final question to you is any questions? I've come to the end, and if you have questions, please feel free to ask. We have a few minutes. We have a few minutes. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Yeah.
Good afternoon, man. Thank you so much for such a session. I'm blown away. I was maybe a part of Maritime Club, but nobody thought it like this. But I'd like to ask the question, what's the difference between Chinese, we call them Chinese hackers and pirates? I don't even know what Chinese hackers are.
Chinese hackers and pirates. So pirates, I know. Chinese hackers, I'm happy to know. So pirates, for instance, would be in Nigerian waters, right? So pirates would be in Nigerian waters, and then maybe they would see a ship coming, they would board the ship. They can put they can put the staff on the ship or the crew on the ship, take them in hostage, so they can literally kidnap them, either take them off or get in control of the vessel and tell them to call their bosses, to call their shipping agencies and send money to them. If not, they wouldn't release them. So years back, I did my master's dissertation on piracy, and this was what 2018, 2019, on this piracy act, right, that had just come out. So there wasn't a law that criminalized that, for instance. So that's what pirates would do then, right? So sometimes they would board the vessel, they would take things from the vessel, they would hold them under hostage. Under hostage, they would kidnap them until they paid money, right? So that's pirates. But I see that Chinese hackers are individuals or group, often state-sponsored or affiliated with China, and they engage in cybersecurity to steal data, to spy, and to sabotage or commit cyber espionage. So not all of them. So this may be different. I'm not sure that they typically would be pirates sponsored by governments, right? Most times governments are even trying to fight pirates because the impact of that would now be insurance companies would increase the premium. So if, for instance, Nigerian waters were unsafe and a ship is coming to Nigeria, they would say, listen, you're going to a high danger zone. We have to increase your premium just so that you need to be sure. Okay. And so that's not good for international trade. That's not good for anybody that's trying to ship into Nigeria. So government would typically try to solve that. But then I understand that Chinese hackers, for instance, is more of like cyber crimes, cyber crimes, and a handful of times they're sponsored by the government. So they're using like computers, they're using networks, they're using malware, they're using viruses, right? But then pirates are literally on ground, they're on sea, they're using boats, they're using weapons, physical weapons, and things like that. So I would say that that's a difference. Yeah. There's also, I mean, to be fair, there's that Chinese hackers can happen in the maritime industry as well, because there's a lot of computerization that's going on. But then, I'll say those are the major differences. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Ma. You mentioned it. I think I did not just get it well. You said Chinese
I think
Oh,
something.
no. I said Chinese trawlers.
Oh.
Apologies. I said trawl. No. So I meant Chinese trawlers. So trawlers are like shipping, vessels used for shipping, right? So when I say Chinese trawlers, I mean like, people on our waters that are perhaps not licensed, or they're overfishing. There's several reports, really, like, I'm not saying this is not even personal beef. Yeah, there's several reports that show that there's a lot of unreported, illegal, unregulated shipping that's happening in our waters, especially by Chinese trawlers. I'm sure that there are other countries that perhaps would be engaging in that, but then Chinese, it's a thing. So I said trawlers as opposed to hackers. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Ma.
Welcome.
Thank you, Osas. Thank you, Miriam, for the answer to her question. I see that Mr. Femi has a question. Mr. Femi, go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, thank you very much to Miriam. It's been very, very insightful. My question is premised on the fact that you talked about overlapping laws. I think I was in a maritime conference some years back, and they also mentioned this particular issue of a lot of laws within that particular space and overlapping laws and all. Is there anything that the industry is trying to do to harmonize laws so that at least this duplicity of laws that we have will not, where you have multiplicity of laws, you have a lot of multiplicity of responsibilities, and you are practically doing the same thing to several agencies. And at the same time, it creates one kind of bureaucracy that isn't friendly, it's not business friendly. we're in the era of where we are talking of business friendliness and ease of doing business. So, what do you have to say about this particular issue of harmonizing laws, where in which somebody doesn't have to visit several agencies just to get permits, just to get to be able to play in that particular space?
Okay, so two responses to that. One, I'm a member of the Nigerian Maritime Law Association, and these are conversations we have very often. And in the past, for instance, we have supported the government, or we have partnered with courts and governments to amend certain regulations, right? So, for instance, the Admiralty Jurisdiction Act. So I know that this is something that we're soliciting, because truth be told, both parties would not want to give it up. What do you mean that my agency is not in charge of regs, right? So beyond even like having it on paper, there's also a lot of soliciting, so to speak, right? That's going on behind the scenes. But I think, for one, the Nigerian Maritime Law Association is something that we work so, for instance, there are a number of like projects we work on like that, right? I know that an aspect of the Constitution, we're providing recommendations in terms of like the revision, and a number of like maritime acts as well. The Senate typically invites us for certain hearings of certain bills, and welcomes our opinion on things like that. So I think it's a project that there are plans to embark on in terms of advising the government for that. But then there's also like the minister of marine and blue economy also tries to like speak to both the parties involved to strike a balance with the two. But I agree with you, surely, that there needs to be a strong move in terms of harmonizing or clarifying the regulations as such. That many regulations, laws in Nigeria is not a walk in the park. It takes several years. So but I know that it's something that they're working on. And then my second response, in terms of like the different agencies, there's something that the country is working on. There's a global platform that's called a single window trade platform. Yeah, something along those lines, single window. And the goal is that different agencies, for instance, NAFDAC, Navy, IMASA, right? Like, the different agencies that participate or are involved in like international trade or like shipping, for instance, they're all on one platform, and then so you're not moving from place to place to place. It's all in one place. I know that we have that now. There is that platform, but then the effectiveness is what I cannot speak to, right? So I think they're still working on it. I think it's gradually picking up. So that's a light at the end of the tunnel. So yeah, I'm very hopeful that like it would be very effective in due time. And so it would reduce the bureaucracy, and just the length people go for clearing their goods or shipping goods or getting certifications, licenses, or things like that from the relevant agencies. So those are my thoughts on your question.
Thank you very much.
Very much. I don't know if there's any other question, because I have a question. I'm just waiting for you to finish. Any other question? Okay. Wow. Okay, so looking forward, right? My own question.
Okay.
So if you had to advise policymakers and like the Maritime Association, like what is the urgent priority to unlock the potential for Nigeria's blue economy within the next 5 years? Okay, let's not say 5 years. Okay, within a short time. What would it be? What would be your advice? Okay, let's deal with this. It's urgent. Let's deal with this so we can, expand the horizon so that we can access this. I mean, you spoke about the amount of money that we could access as Nigerians and our Nigerian economy. So what would be like urgently deal with this?
Oh, really good question, honestly, because I feel like I've talked about so many problems. In the next 5 years, right? If I was going to say, listen, like top 2-3 things maybe you want to address, is, I would say, the people, right? And which may seem like very straightforward, but I think it's important to have, in a sense, a reorientation of the different agencies, because you can make policies, but people are what make policies successful. Okay, so I would say one is like a reorientation of different agencies, and how do I put it? Like in a systematic manner, so as to make the agencies sufficient and effective on their own. We know that like with government agencies, for instance, right? There are a number of practices that are very redundant, you know. So first of all, I would say that there should be like an independent assessment of the different relevant agencies, right? And steps should be taken to make them effective to make them effective independently, right? So this way, like if NIMASA is effective, if NPA is effective, if all the agencies, right, by themselves are more effective, in fact, right? If the port authorities are effective, if people that are working on, so I would say first of all, it's the people, right? So because if you sort out the policy without the people, then you're in it for some problems ahead, Then secondly, honestly, I'm very passionate. I'm very passionate about the shipping industry, the fishing industry rather, right? The fishing industry. I think there's so much potential. There's so much potential. We need to start from reviving that Fisheries Act, right? There's an overhaul that needs to be done with the Fishing Act, right? And then subsequently, perhaps supporting independent or private-owned fishing companies, or establishing relevant fishing companies, or giving incentives for people who are already in the sector, right? To foster exports, to foster trade, and much more. Then I would say, of course, in line with this is our fishing terminals, like I mentioned, right? So the redundant fishing terminals, like putting some more money back in those and managing them to bring them to a point where they're up to speed, right? And I'll say perhaps finally, in terms of like international trade, again, it's a lot of like I think like how somebody has good intentions, but the good intention doesn't play out in the long run, So we also have like certain ports, for instance, in Delta states, right, that are redundant, So it's not a thing of we're starting from the scratch. It's a thing of we're removing the cobwebs, we're bringing some more money, we're bringing infrastructure, because they have access to waters, right? They have access to international waters. If we dredge it deeper, if we put some more infrastructure and facilities in it, it will become effective. And so all the traffic isn't going to Lagos Port. Some goods are going to Delta Port, so we are spreading that out, and there is development everywhere. So off the top of my head, I would say those are the top three things that if the Ministry of Marine and Blue Economy gives attention to, we would see some economic progress and profits in the future.
Thank you very much, Miriam. You actually even I felt that was a very, very good question to start with. But while you were answering it, you now moved on to answer my next question, because you had mentioned the AFC FTA, the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. So I was going to okay, how can we position, since we have implemented it, since we have ratified this convention, how can we position the maritime sector as a regional trade hub? And you just mentioned it as your final point, how we can make use of all these redundant ports. Thank you very, very much. Thank you very much. Osas has a question again.
Okay.
Osas, go ahead.
Okay, Marcia, I just wanted to ask, for someone who is going to be called to bank because next year, how can you pivot into the maritime, into the blue economy? I know that maybe of course next maybe be masters, but in the interim, maybe before masters, how can I pivot into that?
Okay, first off, congratulations on your potential course by next year. It's a big deal. If you've written the bar exam, you know that's a big deal. So yeah, very hopeful for you as well. In terms of pivoting into the blue economy or maritime law. So aside doing a master's, I think you can work in a maritime related company. So for instance, you can work in with a terminal operator. Okay, in the legal department, you work in the legal department of shipping company, work in the legal department of an oil and gas company. You can work in a law firm's legal department, a maritime law firm's legal department, So I think that, for instance, all the sectors that we addressed, or the examples we gave, right? If you work in any of those like businesses that are relevant to it, especially in a legal and perhaps compliance, from a legal compliance point of view, then you'll be fine. That would be a good way, that would expose you very well to just the practices, the policies, and things like that before doing a master's. So you get hands-on experience that way. Yeah, you can work in government agencies as well. You can work in a master. Before I started working in my law firm, I worked in Nigerian Port Authorities with Mercy. So Mercy and I were colleagues then. So we worked in Nigerian Port Authority, the legal department of Nigerian Port Authorities, and that was like solid background to the work that we do now. So yeah, I think that's another way to pivot into the maritime economy.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you, Osas, for your questions. I guess you also made this session very interactive as well. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for participating and staying up till now. Thank you very much, Miriam. I mean, I'm really grateful. We are grateful hearing with One and Eight LP for your time and how well you went into this discussion. It's very, very, I mean, you really, really, really did a deep dive. Okay, so we look forward to hosting every one of you next time for our next knowledge sharing session, our Legal Insight series. If you'd like to suggest topics to continue this conversation, you can reach out to us on our email, reach out to us on our website, on our social media, Instagram, Facebook. We are also on Twitter. So it's a wrap, everyone. Thank you very much. I'm sure this conversation on Nigeria's legal economy will continue. And the opportunity by now, everyone has picked the opportunity. They'll give you, maybe you had a question from your client, what can I invest this money? You now know where to go. So thank you everyone for staying on to now. Thank you everyone.
And thank you very much for the opportunity as well. Thank you all, and thanks Mercy, and thank you everyone that joined us. So this was fantastic. Have a very lovely weekend ahead.
Thank you very much. You too. Bye everyone.